try, but dead on left. Dead on left. Yeah. That's what I remember from seniors. Thank you. Yeah, it's a difficult name.
I'm going to try a few different spots. So here's me right up front.
I think the front row, if that's okay. Kind of there, but in the front row. Put my bag there.
Yep, no, I've got my thing. Here. Or if I'm here,
Yeah. Is that okay?
so you are here. This one?
So whichever one you're more comfortable with.
Do you want me to try them?
Well, it's going to be show us so here. If there is fine.
And you want
The lights are how they're going to be. Okay, I'll let you have a pass on that. It's going to be recorded anyway. Do you want them? Where do you want to sit? Yes. Right up. Right there is fine.
No, I think this is one of them. They're beautiful, yeah. It's like, I just heard these. Oh, did you? We got that green room up there. They're all green, no red ones. Those, no, we don't. And those are only there because it's, yeah, they're there because when we do a bigger show, and it's, see, they, those seats never sell. So in case there's a problem, that's why they're on there. Yeah, so in this kind of a show, it actually doesn't fly. Because people are going to want to.
Oh, are they?
Sort of, they just have to get to that where they are. What did you need it for?
I just want to keep this.
Oh, you'll be fine.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Ruth Snyder, and I'm the Executive Director for the Campbell River and District Chamber of Commerce. Today's event is brought to you by the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board. I acknowledge we are on the unceded territory of the Lakota people. We honor our relationship with the Lakota people, the Wewakam and the Wewakai, as well as all other First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who now reside in the Campbell River area and the Lakota territory. Thank you so much for choosing to spend today with us. I'd like to do some introductions. We have Michelle Babchuk from the NDP on my far right. Nick Dedaluk for the Green Party in the center. And while she had originally accepted the invitation to be here today, Anna Kindy has now declined to attend. I'd like to read the statement from her. Anna politely declines your request at this time. In lead up to October 19th, her focus is on engaging with voters directly at the doors. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Dan McLennan, and our time management individual, Taryn Sieben. Today's event is being recorded, and so it will run exactly 2 hours and not a second more. It is going to be aired on Rogers Community TV 3 different times leading up to the election as per CRTC guidelines and regulations. It will also be shared out on the Chamber's YouTube channel and available from Tuesday on, and will be shared out on our social media. So without further ado, thank you again for coming. Thank you to the Tidemark Theatre and the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board. Dan, it's up to you.
Thank you, Mary Ruth. Welcome to the North Island All Candidates Forum for the 43rd BC Provincial General Election. Thank you for choosing to spend part of your Sunday afternoon participating in the democratic process. British Columbia is holding the provincial election on Saturday, October 19th. 3 candidates have put their names forward to contest the North Island riding. Recapping, they are in alphabetical order: Michelle Babchuk of the BC NDP, Nick Dedaluk of the BC Green Party, and Anna Kindy of the BC Conservative Party. Whether or not you support a specific candidate, each of these candidates deserves your respect. They are to be thanked and applauded for putting their names forward to serve you, and I invite you to do so now. Please permit me a few constructive instructions for today's forum. Number 1, please turn off your cell phones or mute them. And I would ask, in the interests of time, that you please refrain, wherever possible, from applauding after every candidate statement and response. I know this is difficult. It will unnecessarily eat into the very limited amount of time we have here today. As Mary Ruth has told us, we are 2 hours on the button and no more. For opening and closing statements, the candidates will have 2 minutes. I will raise my hand when you have 15 seconds left to wrap up, and I'll ring the bell when your time is up. So let's get started with opening statements, beginning with Michelle Babchuk.
Thank you very much, Dan. Hello, my name is Michelle Babchuk. I'm the NDP candidate for North Island, and I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the territory of the Likwita-speaking people, the Wewakai, Wewakam, and Kwika, but also say how honored I am to live and work in the territories of the Kwakwaka'wakw, Coast Salish, and New Chalmers people. I've lived in Campbell River for about 20 years with my wonderful husband, Dan, and my 2 children, Sean and Amy Lee, and now my 3 wonderful grandchildren that I'm so grateful to have in my life every day. And I was first elected to the School District 72 Board of Education in 2005. I made a jump to City Council in 2014, and I sat on various committees and ended up chairing the Strathcona Regional District. And then in 2020, I was elected as the MLA for North Island, which I have been honored to serve for the last 4 years. We know as a province, we're facing some really big challenges. We're still feeling the fallout from the pandemic, global inflation, and high interest rates, and life is too tough for too many people, and life feels uncertain. We want BC to be a place where people can get ahead, feel secure, where a paycheck allows you to get ahead, not just month to month, but where you can put a little bit of money away every time, and where health care is there whenever you need it. Wherever you can afford a good to afford a good home. I strongly believe in a hopeful message and our government's direction because we're starting to see improvements, but there's still more to do. I'm a strong advocate for healthcare, education, homelessness, and Indigenous rights and title, and I'm really, really looking forward to answering all of the questions tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. And now we'll hear from Green Party candidate Nick Dedaluk.
Hello, Gila Kesla. My name is Nick Dedaluk, and I am your BC Green Party MLA candidate for the upcoming election. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me. Thank you to all of you for attending, and thank you to the Lakhdao peoples for allowing us to do this important business in their territory. I live in Alert Bay in Numgi's territory, and I love living, working, playing, and learning in the territories of the Kwakwaka'wakw speaking peoples. You can often hear me saying that we live in paradise, but don't get me wrong, we have lots of challenges in our riding as well. But for the most part, we have clean air, clean water, beautiful mountains, forests, and a wonderful ocean full of life. People often ask me, why are you running in the election? I am running because as a biologist and an advocate, I want to know that I'm doing everything I can to make things better for our children, our grandchildren, and those children yet unborn. I am concerned with the way things are going. In my lifespan, I've seen noticeable changes with the climate, our forests, and our oceans. I feel like people often have to say we have to choose between the economy and an environment, and I am here to say with a strong voice that we can have both, but we need to make changes. Doing things the status quo isn't going to help us with this. The Green Party has laid out a great platform based on wellness that I believe can bring about the change that we need. The platform is based on 4 pillars: thriving people, resilient communities, a flourishing natural world, society, and governance. I look forward to listening to your concerns and providing answers so that we can have a safe and healthy economy. Gila Kasla.
Thank you, Nick Dedaluk. Throughout this forum, we will be rotating the order of candidates' responses so that the candidates each have the opportunity to answer some questions first or second. And now it's time to move on to questions submitted by members of the public. Some have been edited for time. Candidate responses are limited to 90 seconds each. I will give you a wave when there's 10 seconds remaining for you to wrap up. Starting questions submitted. Our Campbell River Hospital lab has been in dire straits for 5 years when several services were removed. Currently, the lab is consistently short-staffed, and patients now have to wait 3 to 4.5 hours to get blood work done. What will you do to order an external independent investigation of Island Health's operations of the lab and restore its services to the excellent functional level we previously enjoyed? And we will start first with Nick Dedaluk.
Thank you. Healthcare is a really important question and a challenge for us on the North Island. We face similar challenges in our hospitals in Alert Bay and Port McNeill. I'd love to have an immediate solution for you. When I first started, I knew healthcare was a challenge, and I thought there was a quick answer. Unfortunately, what I've learned is our healthcare challenge, as outlined here, is really complex, and it's going to take all of us in government working in a nonpartisan way to try to find a solution to solving so that we can have a safe and accessible healthcare for all.
Nick Dedaluk, and now a question to Michelle Babchuk.
Thank you very much. And do you know, we've had this issue in the Campbell River Hospital since this new hospital was built. And through the work that we have been doing, we are removing barriers to try and get people into that hospital. This is an HR problem, not a resource problem. We are seeing high record levels of investment into healthcare. Currently, we've brought 800 new doctors into the province and 6,300 new nurses. And we are doing the same in our labs as well. But when I'm talking to nurses and doctors and healthcare and all of the other health professionals that work inside of the hospital, one of the other issues that we're having is services that they need to come to work. Currently, we have healthcare workers that are working part-time because they can't access childcare, which we're working on a lot in our riding. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to bring these healthcare professionals in, and that's why David Eby just announced recently that we were going to remove the barriers for people coming in from outside of our province and fast-tracking people in certain jurisdictions from across the globe to get them into our healthcare system as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, health-related question. As a healthcare worker, I believe the vaccine mandate was a necessary workplace safety measure, and most of my colleagues, WorkSafe and unions, agree. Do you believe I'm entitled to a workplace made as safe as possible through such mandates? And first response will go to Michelle Babchuk.
Absolutely. I believe that you're entitled to a safe workplace. And the vaccine mandate, from my perspective, has been one of the biggest success stories that we have seen in keeping people safe. Dr. Bonnie Henry has done a fantastic job in our society, and we're actually living right now in one of the most vaccinated parts of British Columbia. Campbell Riverites and North Island people have gone in droves to make sure that they're vaccinated. But we do have some occupational health and safety issues that are still within the hospital with nurses that we need to look at. But my biggest concern is, listening to Mr. Rustad saying that if he is elected and he becomes the premier, he is going to fire one of the most endeared public servants that kept our community safe as one of his first actions. And he's going to fire Dr. Bonnie Henry. I'm appalled at that. And I hope that the rest of us are as well. We have been noted as being at the leading edge of the vaccines for all of Canada, and the whole rest of the country is looking up to us for what we did here.
Thank you. Nick Dedaluk.
Thank you. I also believe really strongly in a safe workplace, and when the vaccine mandate was brought in, it was brought in to protect all and make everyone safe. I am supportive of that, as is the Green Party supportive. We also have other workplace challenges beyond that we need to work on to make it safe for everyone working in our healthcare system, beyond just physical healthcare, but mental healthcare as well, for our communities to have receive safe and healthy healthcare. Thank you.
Next question, still on healthcare. Why are we spending large sums on private agencies to fill nursing shortages instead of hiring these nurses permanently? Isn't this an inefficient use of resources and a way to avoid paying benefits? First response goes to Nick Dedaluk.
Thank you. So that is, as I mentioned in my previous answer, there is many intricacies with the healthcare challenges and staffing, and especially in our remote communities, the staffing is one of the barriers that is leading. We have emergency rooms in Alert Bay and Port Hardy that are frequently closed due to staffing shortages. We also have housing challenges that accentuate that. When I first started, I thought that our healthcare issue was related to a lack of doctors and a lack of housing. And as I've learned more about this and mentioned earlier, that is just the tip of the iceberg with our healthcare challenges and staffing. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Babchuk.
Thank you, and I couldn't agree more. The agency nurses that we were bringing into rural BC were extremely expensive, and but they were needed and they were there in a pinch. So I certainly don't want to discount what they have done to help people in those rural and remote emergency rooms. But we know through just common practice here that when we have people and we train people in community, they stay in community. They are committed to community. So for example, up in the north end of Vancouver Island, we're running a program alongside of post-secondary education that is training ER nurses in the community. And we're actually on our second cohort right now. We have all of the doctors we need in Port Hardy to keep the ER open, but we do not have the nurses. So with that second cohort, we're hoping that we can start keeping that ER in Port Hardy open 24/7, hopefully into December, but possibly into the new year as well. But, you know, we are investing. We did $30 million to stabilize healthcare in the north end of Vancouver Island, and we are seeing changes there, and we are going to see a huge upgrade on those facilities up there because we've got doctors that are coming out of med school now that are younger that don't see themselves operating in those conditions, and they want state of the art and they want all the equipment that they're used to using.
Thank you, Michelle. Next question. Why hasn't the NDP government taken stronger action to keep dangerous people off our streets? We're dealing with higher costs from damage and security while public safety is compromised. Why do criminals seem to have more rights than law-abiding citizens? First response goes to Michelle Babchuk.
Thank you. You know, I live in this community too. I'm not going to tell you that it hasn't been a challenge in our downtown core. I see it. But, you know, as a government, one of the things that we have done is hired 250 new RCMP officers that have been dispatched more into the rural communities, and we're starting to see them come. We also have teams that are out right now that consist of a prosecutor, a probation officer, and a police officer, I believe, and they are actually following all of our repeat offenders. So they're not being able to continue to do what they are doing on a regular basis. But, you know, at the end of the day, this is a federal issue as well. The feds did some really big bail reform, which then hurt how we are doing this. And you've heard people say, you know, the revolving door. But we have been leading the charge with the feds, along with every other premier in Canada, to get them to change those bail reforms so that we can keep some of those repeat and dangerous offenders in incarceration.
Thank you. Candidate Dedluck.
Thank you. We recognize that we need a BC that is safe and secure for everyone. And we are committed to working towards increasing the safety and having everyone feel safe where they are. There is a lot of underlying causes that is causing people to feel unsafe and be repeat offenders. Some of the underlying issues that we need to address in helping to reduce we need to address the issue of poverty, the issue of homelessness, the issue of colonization, the issue of the lack of basic services and support so that we can get the individuals the support that they need, how they need it, so that we can work with individuals to reduce overall crime, bring back communities where we feel safe and secure in them. Thank you.
Next question, how would your government create legal pathways to support Indigenous, protected, and conservative areas, otherwise known as IPCAs, under BC law? And the first response goes to candidate Dedaluk.
We do have pathways for IPCAs currently, and in the North Island, the Mamalilakla and the Kwakwasutinomis First Nations have both identified IPCAs in our riding. I think they're positive steps forward where we have the province working with local First Nations to identify areas that are important to them to protect for reasons that are specific to those individual nations. The BC Green Party believes, as do I, really strongly in working with our Indigenous communities to protect the areas that are important to them.
Luck and Michelle Babchuk.
Thanks. I'm going to agree with Nick on this one. We already have that process in place, and I would like to add that we also have a IPCA with the Wiwakam Nation at Hamatko. So we are working very strongly with Indigenous communities to make sure that their rights and title are respected and areas that they find that they need protected are being done.
Thank you. Over the past 5 years, government forestry policies have led to a 50% decline in annual cuts and forestry-related employment in BC. What would your government do to reverse this trend and support the industry? First response goes to Michelle Babchuk.
So it's no surprise the BC NDP has certainly put forward a transition plan so that we can make sure that we have our forests and our resources available for our children and our grandchildren going forward. And it has been challenging and it is taking quite a long time, but once again, in collaboration, not only with rural and remote communities, but also with our Indigenous communities, because we need to be able to make sure that everybody has a voice at the table. But I will remind people that under John Rustad's tenure, we lost 30,000 jobs in the forest industry and 20 mills went down without any help for the workers, without any help for Made in BC manufacturing, and without any help for our communities that lost a ton of money in their tax base. And that was all levied back onto the people that were living in those communities. The BC NDP, with their manufacturing jobs plan, has made it so that we are investing in those projects that are in the forest industry as we watch that transition happen, so that we can make sure that people have the ability to work during this transition. You know, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we log in Vancouver Island, and we need to be able to know how to do it sustainably and in a collaborative way.
Thank you. Candidate Dedaluk.
Thank you. I think this is a really important question for our riding, and I think sustainable forestry is a term that we've heard in the past, and I think sustainable forestry that we've had in the past isn't good enough. We need to move forward with change. We need to work with local Indigenous nations into something called a forest landscape plan that looks at our forests as forests again and not as tree farm licenses. And we've got some great pilot projects. I'm less familiar with the one in the Kwikwa territory, but the Numgis have worked with Western Forest Products and BC to come up with a new forest landscape plan that would actually decrease the annual allowable cut, but would actually increase the amount of harvesting that they are allowed. It looks at the forest to protect the most diverse, biologically diverse areas, protecting those and allowing the harvesting in the less diverse areas, so that we can actually have forest landscape plans that protect our forest, protect jobs, and keep it happening for the future while protecting the most biodiverse areas.
Thank you. Next question. BC is not on track to meet its legislative greenhouse gas reduction targets. What are the top 3 actions your government would take to meet the 2025, 2030, and 2050 greenhouse gas goals? If your party doesn't support the carbon tax, will you commit to an alternative measure to meet these targets? And the first response goes to Nick Dedela.
The BC Green Party is committed to a fossil-free future. So that would mean immediately stopping permits for new fracking projects. It would work to reduce methane emissions. It would set ambitious climate pollution targets, and it would make polluters, the big polluters, pay. So the current fossil fuel industries, there would be a transition plan for them. But right now, I've just learned that of the big polluters, 65% of the carbon emissions that they are producing aren't taxed or given back in subsidies, versus us as the smaller polluters are paying on our gas tax and stuff. So there is immediate things that we can do. The change isn't going to be, we're not going to be fossil fuel free immediately, and a mapped out transition plan is necessary, but there is immediate actions that we can do, as well as prohibiting fossil fuel advertising could be one thing that we could do quite quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Babchuk.
Thank you. And, you know, these are great questions because we're seeing the worst forest fire seasons, major floods, extreme weather events, and the climate impacts that are happening now are happening faster than we've ever seen before. So we've developed the Clean BC plan in conjunction with the Green Party, actually, and it's working to reduce emissions and are hitting our climate targets. We've also passed the Climate Change Accountability Act, which legally requires government to be accountable for the emissions and reductions of targets. We're bringing emission caps in for oil and gas industry, and we're trying to create jobs in that clean economy by supporting those new energy and technologies. We are doing rebates for heat pumps, electric vehicles, home efficiency upgrades, but we're still watching Mr. Rustad say that climate science is a lie, and he doesn't believe that we should be fighting climate change. So, you know, I'm not sure how we can expect to move forward if we've got a leader of the BC Conservative Party that will not even recognize that and is on social media saying that climate change is a hoax to stop building or making food, and it's some sort of world depopulation hoax. It's really ludicrous, like, good Lord. Sorry. Thanks, I'm getting the ding.
Thank you both. Next question. From 2016 to 2021, 420 new immigrants came to the Campbell River area. How do you feel our community is doing in welcoming newcomers, and what recommendations does your party have around immigration going forward? First response goes to Michelle Babchuk.
Thank you. I actually welcome the diversity that these new immigrants are bringing, and I spent been at the Immigrant Welcome Center a few times. They are extremely happy to be here. I do have some questions that I hope that we can address going into the next electoral cycle around the provincial nominee program, so that we can make sure that these people are gainfully employed and employed in a job that they can see themselves in, and we can work with the federal government to make sure that their permanent resident status doesn't cost them a fortune, doesn't take forever, but they can still see themselves thriving here. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle Babchuk. Nick Dadeluck.
Well, I'm not totally sure that I can answer that question on how Campbell River is doing, because I live in Alert Bay and I visit Campbell River frequently, but I would like to hope that the community is doing well. The Green Party promotes diversity and safety for everyone. And on the North Island, we are working towards being an inclusive community where everyone feels safe and welcome and has a place to fit in. So I hope that Campbell River is similar along those lines. Sorry.
Thank you. Next question. We're seeing many challenges in the BC economy. Do you see a positive economic outlook moving forward? And what would your government do to grow the economy? First response to Nick Dedluck.
I think that we can have a positive economy going forward. And as I mentioned earlier, when we work with our Indigenous communities, I think there's lots of great plans that can come forward that can provide us with lots of jobs. I think that on our North Island riding, we have a lot of opportunity for positive economic growth. We have a thriving ecotourism industry that, as our wild salmon return is only going to get stronger. We have a fishing community that, as wild salmon return, also is going to get stronger. And as we work together to create more forestry plans, we can have economic development that way as well. There's lots of people that are really interested in coming to the North Island to visit remote communities, and I think we have a lot of opportunity there to continue to develop our economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Babchuk.
Thank you. Do you know, we're so fortunate on the north end of Vancouver Island. People come for a visit, and I've talked to so many people that come for a visit and say, well, I'm going to stay for a year, and the next thing you know, they're here for 30 years. So we do live in one of the most beautiful areas in the world. I'm a bit biased, but do you know, we have had the fastest growing economy in Canada since 2017. We've created more than 250,000 jobs since 2017, including some of the strongest private sector job growth in Canada. We have the highest wages in Canada amongst the provinces and the lowest unemployment rates. We have the great credit rating, and we are seeing people migrate here. And we're seeing people migrate here because it's a great place to be. And sometimes we need to count our blessings a little bit. But, you know, we are watching Mr. Rustad talk about tax cuts, healthcare cuts, and making sure that, you know, the top 2% are getting all of the wealth. So I have some concerns about what that looks like for the rest of us that are working hard and trying to make ends meet. So we still have some work to do. But I do believe we're starting to turn a corner and we can be prosperous on the north end of Vancouver Island.
Thank you. You're both doing great. We're a little over half an hour in. We've been through many questions and there are many more to come. Have a drink of water. And while you catch your breath, I will remind those watching once again that this forum is sponsored by the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board. Our thanks to them for helping to make this possible. Ready to move on? Mm-hmm. Next question. How would your party address the housing affordability and housing shortage crises? First response goes to Michelle Babchuk.
Thank you. So we have our housing action plan that we're putting into place, and we've had our experts tell us that this is going to create 300,000 houses over the next 10 years. And we're going to do that by looking at our public lands, making sure that those are utilized. We watched Mr. Rustad. He could have changed housing. He could have changed healthcare. They've chosen not to. They even sold the property for the hospital in Surrey. But we are seeing in the Campbell River area some really great gains through collaborations with different groups. We're seeing Eagle Harbor, where that was just built, Macola Housing, the Head Injury Society, We've watched Quox in place come to fruition. I'm talking with developers on a regular basis to see what they need to make it affordable and to make their numbers work so that we can even get into market housing. But the continuum of housing is actually starting to show up here, and now we need to figure out how do we actually make it affordable for the rural communities. Mr. Rostad has said he doesn't believe that the government should be in the business of housing. Now, when you pass Sayward and your cost of housing goes up by $125 a square foot, I wonder how anybody can afford to do that. So as a government, we're investing in people, we're investing in housing for people, because we believe that that's where our social programs start.
Thank you. Candidate Daedaluk.
So we do have a housing crisis in our riding, and we in Alert Bay feel this really strong, and I can imagine it's equally as strong in all of our communities. Not only do we not have enough units, but some of the units of housing that we have aren't safe, they're not affordable, it's hard for our children to go out and get housing, and this is all over the riding, not just in Alert Bay, but we've brought in some tiny houses into Alert Bay, which has been a really successful solution to increase some housing units. And I think that we could see that all over. They're cost effective and they're affordable. The Green Party has made a commitment of $1.5 billion to construct 26,000 non-market housing units annually for the next 3 years, because we see this as a problem in our province, and they're committed to working with nonprofits to get those houses to who needs them. And another part of the housing challenge, I think, is if we can invest more into our trades and have our local tradespeople in our communities, that can help with some of the challenges that Michelle addressed about the affordability as we move out of our cities. So we do have solutions for housing.
Thank you. Also, a reminder, I was remiss in not stating this sooner, there will be ample time for questions from the floor once we go through a few more of our previously submitted questions. We have a segment coming up, a brief one, where the candidates get an opportunity to ask questions of each other. And then after that, we will run with questions from the floor. So don't worry, we'll get there. Next question. Do you support significantly expanded trades education as a way to attract more qualified trades workers to help expand the housing supply? First response goes to Nick Daedaluk.
Yes, I do support that, and I think that's will be a big help with our housing challenges. Again, I lean on my Alert Bay experience, but I imagine that most of our rural communities and even Campbell River is having challenges getting tradespeople to help us not only with building new houses, but repairing the houses that we have. Those trades are especially important and also provide economy, and if we can have our youth going into the trades programs, and that allows them to stay home without moving away. So 100% supportive of investing in trades education programs.
Thank you. Candidate Michelle Babchuk.
Yeah, thank you. This is extremely important, and that's why we are working with the post-secondary institutions to try and make sure that we are training people closer to home. Like I said earlier, if we are training people in community, they stay in community. And some of the barriers that we're seeing, especially around housing and affordability, is if you are from Campbell River and you have to go to Vancouver or Victoria, it's very difficult to be able to afford that. So we are investing in more apprenticeship, and we are trying to bring it home and working with North Island College to make sure that those trades training opportunities are, like I said, closer to home. It will help with our housing affordability piece, but the other thing that we're also looking at is how do we bring that into our schools to be able to help our children. So I am concerned about, some of the cuts, once again, that Mr. Rustad's going to make to our post-secondary education systems and our regular education systems. He's already talking about class sizes and composition that are absolutely outside of the scope of any collective agreement. So I'm hoping that we can continue to work as the BC NDP to make sure that those training opportunities stay close to our communities.
Thank you. Next question. Will your government enact a new mineral tenure law that aligns with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? How will you ensure the public is meaningfully involved in reforming BC's mining laws? And the first response goes to Michelle Babchuk.
So we are currently working through the Ministry of Energy, Mine and Low Carbon Innovation to do just that, and we're starting to see some real traction with the First Nations communities, mostly up in northern BC, where they have felt so disenfranchised for very many years. And through our work with reconciliation and DRIPA and making sure that we are respecting individual rights and title, we are being able to have those discussions across the table in a collaborative way, not in a courtroom. So when we are talking about DRIPA and Mr. Rustad wanting to repeal DRIPA, what that will do is take everything back at least a decade, put us all back into court so that we're not having those collaborative conversations, nation to nation to nation, government to government to government, with everybody at the table.
Thank you. Candidate Nick Didluck.
So the Green Party is very supportive of working, as am I, of working with our Indigenous communities. Keeping UNDRIP and DRIPA is very important to us, and I'm sorry, I don't know very much about the mining, so I can't provide an answer on that one.
Thank you. The next question. Consumerism is depleting the planet's resources and harming our quality of life. We're focused on growing the economy rather than living sustainably. What will you do to redefine success and educate the public to live within our means, financially, materially, and ecologically? The first response goes to Nick Didluck.
I would agree with that statement, and those of you that know me know that I work very hard to minimize my impact and minimize consumerism, and those are values that I live by on a daily basis. And I know that not everyone chooses to live that dedicated to that, but I think that if we start looking at measures of success as measures of wellness, which would include our mental health wellness, the resilience of our communities, and I think we can do that without being overburdened by the consumerism of everything. We have some great local community gardens where we can learn to live with our footprint locally and sustainably. Reusing the clothing industry has a huge extraction on our earth. So there's many ways that we can live successfully without having to rely on consumerism to drive the economy.
Thank you. Candidate Babchuk.
Thank you. I agree with Nick with a lot of it, but what I also believe is that, we have communities and I'm just gonna focus on Cortes Island, and I don't think there's a person on Cortes Island that hasn't considered what their footprint is on this earth. But individually, we have a really hard time of making that huge impact. We have to do it as a group, and we have to do it together, and we have to do it, like Nick said, when we're looking at determinants of health, and we're looking at food security. And I had the opportunity to go and visit the garden that's up at Alert Bay, and they're doing just that. keeping it close so that we're not relying on shipping goods and you know, just making sure that, I mean, in the north end of Vancouver Island, if you've got a snowstorm or something, the truck don't come through. So we have to be able to live sustainably on our own, in our own areas. So I am, like I said, I don't have much else to say. I agree with Nick on that.
Thank you. Next question. The Cowichan Watershed Board is a model for collaborative watershed planning. Do you support implementing similar approaches to enhance watershed health in our community? What actions will you take to give local communities a stronger voice in managing local watersheds? First response to Michelle Babchuk.
So watershed security is absolutely imperative, and especially on the north end of Vancouver Island. And we're doing a lot of that work through the forest landscape planning and the Vancouver Island landscape planning that is now complete. The Gwinnai project that Nick talked about with the Numgis First Nations, Western Forest Products, and the communities on the North Island are mapping all of those. So, you know, we're looking at our riparian areas, we're looking at our streams for fish and stock, we're looking at, you know, our basins to make sure that we aren't depleting a lot of the groundwater. I know on Quadra Island, they have mapped this extensively, and we need to be able to do that all across the north end of Vancouver Island. I love the idea of a watershed board. I love the idea of local knowledge inside of that watershed board, and I would certainly support that.
Thank you. Candidate Dedluck.
It sounds like Michelle and I feel pretty similar about this, so I'm not sure that I can add too much more, except for watershed security is so important. It's so important to all of us for so many different reasons. Michelle listed quite a few of them, but just to say that the Green Party as well is very supportive of watershed securities. One of the things they were talking about is creating more watershed security boards, investing in watershed security, and yeah, I don't know what else to add, but yes, totally support this.
Enshrine the newly released Coastal Marine Strategy into law, and what further steps will you take to ensure its successful implementation? First response goes to Nick Dedluck.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that strategy, so I'm going to have to reserve comment on that.
Next response goes to Michelle Babchuk.
Well, enshrine is a interesting word, but it is our plan. We certainly put that together with a lot of input from all of the communities, all of the coastal communities, because one of the things we don't have is a strategy that takes a look at how we function as a maritime coastal communities, but also in a sustainable way. So, and when we're having conversations with the federal government, they're telling us, you know, we don't know what you guys want. So ultimately, that's what that was. Kelly Green, who was a parliamentary secretary for the Water, Lands and Resource Stewardships Ministry, did a lot of work on that. There was a lot of consultation up and down the island. And I believe that it's an absolutely great plan that takes a look at protection, but also takes a look at the economy, and it is something that I hope that we make, that we put into legislation for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. The Immigrant Welcome Center's 2023 Needs Assessment research shows that many immigrants who live here are employed below the level of their skills and experience. How would your party reduce barriers to employment so that newcomers are not underemployed? First response to Michelle Babchuk.
So I talked a little bit about this with our healthcare platform, Because one of the things that we're seeing is people coming into our community from other countries, and they are underemployed, and that's usually because they're not meeting whatever regulatory body, whether it be the College of Physicians and Surgeons or the Nurses College or the Engineering College, they're not meeting their benchmarks. So we have put in place the ability to move some of those benchmarks, but also have them come into the occupation maybe at a little bit of a lesser grade. So if you're a doctor and you're coming into the hospital, you're not quite meeting the benchmarks of the College of Physicians and Surgeons and need to go back to school, you could come in as an associate doctor underneath a doctor that already hits the regulations, so that we can get people into the system and then get them trained as we're moving forward. So we're doing that with a whole variety of occupations coming in to make sure that everybody that we have in BC is working at their highest level. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Dedluck.
Thank you for this. I think that it's important for us to work with all individuals within our communities to make sure that we're providing skill sets so that we can have gainful employment for all of our individuals. And so there is more training programs going out there, as Michelle said. If we work with the North Island College and try to provide the services that are needed to help with getting them the services that they need so that we can have them as part of our community to help with our, thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Do you think there should be an independent Office of Science reporting only to the Auditor General to provide quality assurance on scientific evidence before it's used in government policy? And the first response goes to Nick Dedluck.
An independent. I would hope that we do have science going into policy. I'm not sure about it needing to be independent, but I feel pretty confident in our levels of government that we would be already accessing the scientists to help us with our policy development. It takes, in order for us to have good working policies that are successful for our communities, we need community input, as well as science-based. So yes, 100% support having scientists. Whether it needs to be independent, I'd need to look a little bit more into that, but I hope we do have science helping us with our policies.
Thank you. Michelle Babchuk.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure that there is an independence. I'm a little bit gobsmacked by the question, to be truthful. I guess it depends on which side is looking at the science on who thinks who is independent, because that's the problem we're having right now. You know, as a government, we're trying very hard to make sure that all of our decisions are based in fact and based in science. The question always comes up of whose science it is that you're looking at. And I guess maybe that's where this question is coming from. You know, do we need somebody that everybody trusts to make sure that that happens? I'm not sure that person's out there, to be truthful. So do we need to make sure that there's oversight? Sure. Do we need to make sure that the science is done properly and factually? Absolutely.
Thank you. Last question from the submitted questions. Do you think it is a good idea to be using public funds to support FIFA's 2026 World Cup soccer games in Vancouver? Couldn't this money be better spent on healthcare? And the first response goes to Michelle Babchuk.
Okay, so I am not a huge soccer fan. I'm a hockey gal. But I will tell you that soccer is the biggest or largest watched sport in the world. that it brings millions of dollars with it. So when we're talking about FIFA here and the amount that it's going to cost us, we are going to reap the benefits by that at least fivefold. It's going to bring economic benefit to Vancouver. It's going to bring economic benefit to our province. And I know that there is a huge price tag that's with it, but at the end of the day, I believe that we are going to benefit economically from actually having it here. And we're going to be able to showcase what we can do in British Columbia to the rest of the world. And I'm just going to go back to the Olympics. That was something, this conversation happened then as well. And the amount of revenue that came in from the Olympics to British Columbia after 2010 was staggering. And there are still people that are coming here to stand in front of that cauldron that's down at Jack Pool Plaza to be able to say they were here. So yes, I think that FIFA will, in the end, be beneficial to British Columbia.
Thank you. Nick Dedeluck.
Well, again, I think Michelle and I have similar answers, but I will say that I come from a very strong soccer community. I have many relatives that play soccer, nieces and nephews, and I think when we look at large activities like FIFA coming in or the Olympics, as Michelle, and it's scary to hear that price tag for the infrastructure and for bringing it in, but it does draw a huge amount of people to our province. They're not just going to come to Vancouver. Vancouver Island has a great reputation. They're probably going to come all the way up to our riding, and we're going to benefit from that as well. So I understand that the price tag might be scary, and yeah, we have lots of areas in the province where we could use that money, but that investment will return so many times over. And in other past ones, we've reaped the benefit of infrastructure that has provided for our communities over the long term once that sporting event has passed. So,
Thank you. Thank you to both candidates. That takes us all the way through our submitted questions. We now move into a segment where you can ask questions of each other. Each of you will get 30 seconds to ask a question of the other, and that candidate will get 90 seconds to answer. There's even room for a 30-second follow-up question by the original questioner, and a 60-second response to the follow-up question. And we can go through that rotation 3 times if you've got the questions for it. So let's try the first round, and that will be up to Nick Dedeluck to ask a question in 30 seconds of Michelle Babchuk.
okay, so this question, is for Michelle, but it is my understanding that the current legislation doesn't tax the first 65% of the carbon emissions produced by the oil and gas companies. Can you explain why this is and why, as smaller polluters, it's felt that we're all paying on every liter that we purchase?
So it's my understanding and certainly our goal to make sure that large polluters pay their fair share of tax. We saw in the past under the Liberal or United government, those royalties staying with those people. We are transitioning that, and that's going to change. And we are already making sure that the oil and gas industry does pay their fair share. And we're also taking away like some of the deep well royalties as well. So we are making sure that, like I said, at the end of the day, those big producers, those big people that are putting carbon back into our planet are paying their fair share.
Thank you. Does Nick Dedeluck have a follow-up question to that?
So then if they're paying their fair share, that would be bringing in a lot of revenue to BC, and is it that the NDP has decided that they're no longer going to be charging the carbon tax?
No, well, if you're talking about carbon tax, Mr. Eby has come out and said that he would remove the carbon tax, but just so that people understand this, The federal government is the one that puts forward the carbon tax. In BC, we decided to do our own carbon tax to make sure that we had the ability to use the money and give the money back to the people that are at the bottom end of that. Like you said, it's coming back in carbon rebate to most people in this room. But most people don't understand that even if we got rid of the carbon tax in BC, the federal carbon tax still kicks in. So we can say we're going to remove it, but we are still going to see the carbon tax come in at the federal level.
Thank you. Now, Michelle Babchuk, your chance to ask a 30-second question of Nick Daedaluk.
Yes, thank you. So your leader has said they're willing to work with John Rustad. Given the BC Greens' view on the environment, why would your leader not rule out working with a climate science denier? And why would you consider working with Rustad when he's committed to cutting $4 billion from healthcare?
I think probably what Sonia said was that she's willing to work with both parties, and that the BC Greens see themselves in the middle of the political debate, and we're well positioned to work with both parties to make things move forward better for British Columbians.
Thank you. Does Michelle have a follow-up?
So are you personally worried about what a John Rustad government would do for our riding?
Yes, I am very worried.
Okay, so that was our first round.
Yeah.
Now we would reverse the order so that Michelle Babchuk can ask a question of Nick Daedaluk. 30 seconds.
So, Dan, you know, I didn't expect that Anna wasn't going to show up today, and she's declined this debate. So I'm concerned. I mean, she'll show up for Freedom Convoy rallies. She'll show up for anti-vax rallies. She'll show up on the steps of the College of Physicians and Surgeons.
I'm sorry, have you got a question here?
But she's not going to show up for you, and that's my point. So I do have another question for Nick. Just knowing that Mr. Rustad has said he will increase class sizes and censor books, not only sexual education books, but also books regarding the climate, that he is committed to healthcare cuts, reversing our homes action plan, and that's going to produce over 300,000 homes over the next 10 years. I would like to know, what do you think the next steps are in this riding to be able to stop a John Rustad government?
I think that we have a challenge here, and that we need to work. Yeah, I don't. Sorry. I think you should vote green. I'm sorry. Like, we need to put our environment first. There is a climate change crisis going on. We do have a healthcare crisis. We do have affordability. We need to work with a party that puts our communities and our peoples first to work on these issues. And yeah, I'm nervous.
Does Michelle have a follow-up?
Yeah, I am. You know, I'm just going to speak frankly. I'm really concerned about this riding because it is going to be. There's only two parties in this race here. One of two parties will form government for this province, and that's either the BC Conservative Party or the BC NDP Party. And we're seeing that just by taking a look at the numbers. It's an extremely close riding.
That's not a question I hear so far.
I know. You said I had 30 seconds to ask the question. Okay. Now you're picking on me, Dan.
I think you might have used it all up there.
Anyway, thank you. And I appreciate you being up here, Nick, but I'm just hoping that you can tell me how you think you're going to make any headway working with a Conservative government?
Well, I think actually that it's really important that we do have some Greens that get elected so that we can hold them accountable and hold the government so that we can make progress. I think that having only one government or the other party, I think it would be healthy to have a minority government with some Green seats elected so that we can hold some accountability going forward.
Thank you both. That's 2 rounds.
Dan, sorry, would I be able just to ask a quick question before we do the next
By
question?
all means.
You know, I think that when we were preparing our questions, we were preparing for 3 candidates to be here. And so Michelle and I have been doing an awful lot of talking back and forth, but I wonder if we had questions for the Conservative candidate, if we might be able to, we won't get a response, but could they still be asked?
They could still be asked. A very good question indeed, and I would say, sure, they could be asked. And as you say, you're not going to get an answer, but that doesn't mean you can't ask. So yours is the next opportunity to ask whoever you would like in 30 seconds or less.
Well, as much as I wanted a question for Anna, my last question is going to go to Michelle, and I think that I wanted to know, because I can't get an answer from this, how do you deal with when there's times where the legislature is putting a vote forward and there's a party decision, but it's not necessarily the best decision for our riding? How do you deal with being told to vote one way when it doesn't necessarily benefit our riding?
So I'm in the party that I am in because I believe in what we're doing. So it's not very often that we actually see that, but I will say that I have, inside of caucus, stood up and had very strong conversations around some of our resource extraction. I've got some colleagues in downtown Vancouver that don't quite understand what that means for us up here. Forestry questions, jobs questions, environmental questions that, you know, people in downtown Vancouver just don't know. So I feel in our caucus, I am able to stand up, I am listened to, I am taken seriously, and I also see our decisions coming out of the Premier's office reflecting those pieces that I have been able to put forward.
Does Nick wish a follow-up?
No, that's great.
Michelle, do you have a final question for your fellow candidate?
Well, I actually have a question for our candidate that's not here today. And I asked her this question at the senior center as well, and I did not get an answer. So I'm going to ask it again in hopes that she feels that she might be able to answer me, at some time. And I'm going to ask it exactly the same, just so that I don't want to do a side swipe or anything. So I asked Anna at the Seniors Forum, the BC Conservatives have several candidates with controversial views, like the Conservative candidate Chris Sankey, who claimed that on social media that COVID vaccines caused AIDS. Anna, as a medical professional, do you agree that with this candidate, the COVID-19 causes AIDS? And if not, why haven't you spoken up against these harmful beliefs?
And that wraps up our Candidates Asking Candidates Questions segment. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, of course, questions from the floor. If you have a question to ask in a respectful manner, please take your turn at microphone 1 or 2 down here near the stage. You will have 30 seconds to pose your question, so please be as concise as possible. This is not the place for long-winded observations or manifestos. I will ring the bell when your 30 seconds has expired. You may direct your questions to one or all of the candidates, but each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to every question. You will not be allowed an immediate follow-up question, but if you have an additional question, please go to the back of the line so that everyone has a chance to ask their questions. So let's call this microphone 1. You're up. 30 seconds.
Thank you to both of you for being here today. It means a whole lot to me as somebody who believes in democratic process. I'm very disappointed that our Conservative candidate is not here today. So my question is, you talked a little bit about, and it's to both of you, health and safety in the workplace. I work in the K-12 sector, and something that has been a problem, and it's a growing problem in K-12, is in fact violence in the workplace. We have more and more challenging students that are coming into our system that are not always properly resourced. We have not enough education assistance, not enough supports in classrooms. So I'm just looking for what either of you are considering to do to help this situation in our school system. Thank you.
Thank you. First response goes to Nick Dadeluk.
Thank you. The safety, the health and safety of our children and the staff is really important in our schools. And I can imagine that in Campbell River that is a challenge. But in our remote communities where we have really small attendance schools, 30 or 40, it's accentuated because we aren't able to bring the staff in. There's no housing. It's something that I think we really need to put a lot of effort and solutions into. All children and staff need to feel safe in their schools, and we need to find how to better resource that. Having an individual EA and needing to be the one-on-one for multiple children when those children need their own individual EA is my understanding of what's needing to happen in our very small schools, and that's not a positive solution for the staff or the children. So I would commit to trying to find a solution to better help that resource that.
Thank you. Candidate Michelle Babchuk.
Thank you. And this is a really important question. And most of you know, I said earlier that I started in the school district in 2005. And our EAs have a bit of a challenge because they are mostly part-time to fit inside the walls of the school times. So as a province, what we have done is added before and after school care. We now have 13 sites in the school district 72 that have before and after school care. And what this does is allow our EAs to then become full-time. So they're going from, and they're seeing the same kids, but they're going from a classroom into a before and after school care. And it stops them from having to go find second jobs. It's a good paying job, and it allows us to retain and attract more. But we've also just announced in our platform that we are going to be making sure that we are putting more educational assistance into the classroom, also more mental health supports inside our school system, because we know that our kids are our future, and we need to make sure that their educational journey is a good one. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Question from microphone 2.
Hi, my name is Ken Vandenberg. I've been interested in this question about carbon tax since it got introduced quite a while ago by the BC Liberal government. I'm trying to figure out where the idea that there is a climate crisis comes from, and things like, I've been looking at things like in Greenland, where the Vikings used to make beer with barley that they grew there. It's still too cold to grow barley there. I've been looking at every time that someone tries to tell me that there's a big fire that happened last year is the worst we've ever had. And I'm looking at things like the Blodell fire that happened here in 1936, where there were fires from California up to Hawaii, or up to Alaska,
So
and out to
have you got a
Saskatchewan.
question, sir?
So the question that I have is, in the view that no government has done any due diligence, and apparently there is no Office of Science to inform us of whether there actually is a climate crisis. I'd like to know where it is that you've decided that there is a climate crisis. What data are you looking at? And are you sure that this is not just part of a popular mass grand delusion?
Thank you for that question. Starting response from Michelle Babchuk.
A mass grand illusion. We are seeing unprecedented forest fires, unprecedented extreme weather, heat domes, floods. I don't know that I personally don't need a scientist to tell me that our climate is changing and that we need to be able to do something about it. That's why I'm so gobsmacked that Mr. Rustad says that he doesn't believe in climate science. So I believe that we do have a climate emergency happening right now, and we do need to do stuff about it, and we need to do it as a collective, or else we're not going to be able to change its direction.
Thank you. Candidate Nick Deadluck.
I totally believe we have a climate crisis on our hands, and I look around at our oceans. I look at the ocean acidification that's affecting the individuals in there. I look at the heat wave that's affecting our invertebrates and in the intertidal. I look at the storms that are becoming more frequent, that are becoming stronger, our rainfall that's happening and destabilizing the land, that's increasing landslides. I'm sorry, one of the reasons that I'm running is because I really strongly believe that we have a climate crisis on our hands, and yeah.
Thank you. Question from microphone 1.
Thank you. I'm very disappointed that the candidate, Kindy, is not here. I do not feel at all represented when she doesn't want to show up and listen to our questions, because this is much more efficient than knocking on all of our doors, or half of our doors.
Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I have a question for both candidates, but specifically for Nick Deadluck. I thank you very much for running, and I'd like to know how you can help us to defeat the Conservative government who doesn't believe in what we believe in and who doesn't want to listen to what we have to say.
First response goes to Nick Deadluck.
I think that we have to vote. The Green Party is really well positioned to work to make changes, to work together with the other parties so that we can have our views going forward. It is to form government is going to be one of two parties, but that doesn't mean that we can't have Green MLAs working to carry our views forward to hold the other two parties accountable. Is that answering your question? Not.
It is, except it doesn't answer what do we do specifically for our riding.
I think that for our riding, we have to vote how we feel in our hearts, and that means that we are going to have to vote Green.
Thank you.
Thank you. Response next to Michelle Babchuk.
So I don't think the Green Party owns the whole stage on the environment. As a party, we have done more for the environment in the last 7 years than we've seen the Liberal or United or whatever they were called do in the 17 years prior. We did clean BC, and that was in conjunction with the Green Party. We have passed the Climate Accountability Act. We are holding big polluters' feet to the fire to make sure that it's coming. So in this riding, I don't know how many of you are looking at the polls, but it's pretty much deadlocked here. And if we want to continue protecting our environment and moving this riding forward, it's a BC NDP vote is the only one that's going to stop the Conservatives.
Next question from microphone 2.
This is for both of you. Farm salmon is British Columbia's largest agricultural export, contributing around 1.5 billion annually to British Columbia's economy. What will your parties do to support the industries and protect the jobs which are largely in the North Island riding?
First response goes to Michelle Babchuk.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So once again, we're dealing with a federal transition and they're dragging their feet. So the uncertainty in this industry is absolutely high, and it's making people extremely anxious. So as a province, we are in charge of tenure, and what we have historically and continue to say is that there's two clarifications that need to happen. If DFO gives the license, which means that they've met all the environmental targets and they are not impeding a run of salmon with a farm, and that Indigenous participation in the form of a joint venture or an MOU has been signed, then we will issue tenure. But that's not just the end of it. We need to make sure that as we move forward with industry, that we are doing a modern and sustainable way of doing business. And we have industry here like Poseidon, Heather and Matt Clark, who are at the leading edge of technology that's creating a barrier between what a farmed salmon and our wild stocks would be. So, you know, we need to be able to take this out of the boardroom and put it in the kitchen for people that are in these industries. It doesn't matter which side of farm salmon you are on. You have to agree that it is a large economy for the north end of Vancouver Island, and if the feds are going to blow it up, then they need to pay for it.
Thank you. Response to Nick Daedaluk.
I think that farmed salmon in the ocean is no longer sustainable. We have lots of science saying that we need farmed salmon out of the ocean. People are concerned about jobs, and I think that there should be a transition plan so that our employment isn't lost. Saying that the farms are going to go to closed containment is one really great answer, but for our riding, they're not going to move to closed containment in our riding. So while that's a solution that protects jobs, it's not a solution that's going to work in our riding. So we need to work on a transition plan. There's lots of jobs out there. There's lots of wild salmon jobs out there. There's salmon stewardship jobs that are available. We will be working to transition those employees that are losing their job from the transition plan.
Thank you. Question from microphone 1.
Hi, my name's John Partika, and thank you for coming here to answer our questions, including mine, I hope. Are either of your political parties making any plans to reduce the ever-expanding size, cost, and complexity of government? And if so, what are you going to do to help us reduce some of these costs that seems to me, as I've already said, grow with every new government?
Thank you for the concise question. And the first response goes to Nick Daedaluk.
I'm not sure that this is the answer that you want, but so the Green Party has provided a platform that's fully cost out to keep the costs within the revenues that are made. So if I understood your question correctly, you're concerned about the growing cost and potentially the debt that's associated with the new governments as they continue to expand. And while I don't have the fine details that I think you're looking for, the Green Party is committed to staying within the costed out budget that we have as a province right now.
Thank you, Nick Daedaluk. Next response goes to Michelle Babchuk.
You know, I think we're willing to look at any of this. Mr. Eby just said yesterday, I believe, when he was in Vernon, that he was going to take a look at the health authorities to take a look at all of those middle management positions to see if we can't streamline our healthcare system a lot better. Do I think it's unilateral across the whole of government? No, I think we've got some pieces of our government that are underserved, but I also think that we've got some that are overserved. So I would like to think that into the next tenure, we would be looking at all of those.
Thank you. Question from microphone 2.
Thank you. This is a question for both the candidates. The fossil fuel industry in BC has been pushing for more fracking and accessibility up in the Peace River area, but I believe this is a province-wide issue. The tax revenues that they've created are nowhere near matched by the amount that they've been given in subsidy. What will you do to end this travesty?
Thank you. First response goes to Michelle Babchuk.
Well, you know, that depends on which way you look at this, because we are already doing that. I am going to say right up here on stage, I am not a fan of fracking. I think it's an absolutely deplorable process. I think it does not help our earth. I worry about the water that it's draining off and creating that sludge that's stuck in between our earth there. So that's my first part. That's my personal piece. I might have got in trouble for saying that, actually. But that's my personal view. But we are doing everything we can to make sure that those royalties are not there for those big companies, and we are moving to make sure that they pay their way and make sure that they are paying for any pollution that they're putting in. So.
Thank you, Michelle. Response from Nick Daedaluk.
So the Green Party is committed to ending the fossil fuel subsidies, and as I answered earlier, is my understanding is the first 65% of the pollution that they are producing is covered in subsidies. So the Green Party is taking those away and making those big polluters pay.
Thank you. Question from microphone 1.
Thank you, and I do want to thank the candidates for showing up here today. My name is John Rice, and I represent one of the electoral areas here on North Island. My question to you, and I know this question was asked about housing, but what I didn't hear is what are you going to do for the regional districts and the electoral areas, considering that we've been asked to rezone a lot of our zoning to allow extra density, and yet we know that we don't have the water infrastructure. We're still on septic fields. We have issues with transportation. So I'd like to hear from both of you, what is your idea that we can work with the electoral areas? Thank you.
Thank you. First response to Nick Daedaluk.
I think that the parties need to work with our local communities, because we know the challenges that we have as local communities. You mentioned the infrastructure, but we also have challenges for bringing the houses in. I'm a big fan of working towards tiny house communities that have lower footprints and lower costs to produce, that get people into safe and adequate housing. I don't know if that's the answer that you're looking for, but I know in our writing, I believe we have 2 different regional districts that represent a lot of our communities, and I think that the provincial government working with those regional districts, we can find solutions.
Thank you, Nick. Next question, a response to Michelle Babchuk.
So like I said before, we have a housing action plan that's going to, we've been told will deliver 300,000 homes over the next 10 years. So we've been working with the UBCM, the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, to have those conversations about more rural areas as you guys look at rezoning and densification, which is why I think it's so important that government is involved in making sure that the housing starts happen. We have addressed infrastructure, and we have addressed that in our new platform. I'm hoping that we can talk about that more, John, to be truthful. But the reality is that our rural communities are having a really hard time attracting developers, being able to do it in cost-effective ways, And Mr. Rustad has turned around and said that he will cancel this housing action plan, and that will make it so that the only people in the housing game are people that are doing it for market level housing, and we will lose all of the affordable housing opportunities. Communities will not be able to take a look at infrastructure development, and we won't be moving forward. So I hope we're there, to be truthful, John, to make sure that areas like yours, areas like Alert Bay, Port Hardy, get the housing that they need to be able to support their communities, so that we can make sure that the services are there and everybody has a good home.
Thanks. Question from microphone 2.
Hi, sorry. My eyes are a little bit affected by that light.
Yeah.
I have many questions, but I thought I'd take one that was a bit personal. I am a senior, and I have chronic depression. And I am not allowed to have a pet. It would make, I think if we take a look at the population, many of us are aged now, and many of us have depression or some other ailment. Having a companion should be a right, but it isn't. I'm just putting that out as consideration.
Was there a question?
Yeah, would you support seniors seniors period, to have the right to have a companion pet, no matter what?
First response to Michelle Babchuk.
So I'm going to respond to this with some personal stuff of my own. I have a father that's renting in one of our senior facilities here today, who has his lovely dog Dasher, and I thank my lucky stars for Dasher every day. Every day, that's his companion, and he spends a lot of time with him. In our new platform, we've actually committed to removing any pet restrictions in rental properties across British Columbia. So yes,
Yes,
we are considering it.
in my lifetime.
In your lifetime.
All right.
Response from Nick Dadeluck.
I don't actually know the Green Party's stance on that question, but it's a really valuable question, and I know the benefits of companion pets, and so I would be advocating that that's something that they should look into.
Well, we've been at it now for more than an hour and a half. I commend you both for your stamina. Have another drink of water. And I will once again remind those in attendance and those watching that we are here in large part because of sponsorship from the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, and our thanks go out to them. Question from microphone 1? I don't see anyone. Question from microphone 2, a suspected follow-up.
Yeah, it is kind of sort of related. The question I have is, do you think it's appropriate to be spending money to protect against 1 meter sea level rise, as is touted in the city of Campbell River's plan to protect our waterfront, when the local tide gauge apparently hasn't been looked at, it showing that sea level is actually dropping at a rate of 1.82 millimeters per year, or about, that means that the land here is actually rising about twice as fast as the global sea level is?
Response goes to Nick Dadeluck.
So I'm not totally familiar with what you were talking about, that funding project, but I do think that we do need to look at our waterfronts and protecting them against all types of changes. And just because the water level is dropping or the land is rising, the waterfront in our communities is super important and brings a huge amount of peace and value to our areas. So looking to protect our waterfront regardless of the reason, I think is a valuable, if you're talking about like infrastructure challenges, I think that it's important for us to have a safe infrastructure along our waterfront.
Thank you. Response from Michelle Babchuk.
I agree, and was part of the city council when our sea level rise commitments came into place. Very happy with the results of that. You can see that down on the Old Island Highway as we're coming forward, and that has protected erosion on the part of or on our banks. And we see a lot of migration of sand and rock that moves down those beaches, and it has done a whole bunch of work. That was actually an award-winning project that happened there, and we are seeing sea level rise, and we are seeing our polar caps melt. We're watching that regularly on TV as big chunks of ice are coming off of the icebergs. So I will, respectfully agree to disagree with you there, sir. But we do have to make sure that that infrastructure and that land is protected for the future.
Thank you. No question from microphone 1, question from microphone 2.
Okay, it's not a follow-up. Well, I just noticed one thing with the Conservative candidate not here. At an event like this, which I think is really important, I'm concerned about the state of our democracy. One of the things that I've noted over the last several years is there's some very high-profile issues that have been responded to in draconian ways. So the RCMP shutting down protests on Wet'suwet'en and unceded territory to push a pipeline through. The shutting down of protests in the Fairy Creek area where people are protesting against the loss of old growth. To me, protest is part and parcel of a lively democracy. Do you agree that there has been overreach in how these protests have been dealt with? And do you think there should be new democratic mechanisms that allow people to engage and influence policy in these difficult areas to enliven and enrich our democracy?
Thank you. First, a response to Michelle Babchuk.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm a huge advocate for our democratic process, and I am a huge advocate for peaceful protest. I've been involved in a few myself. But I'm also a huge advocate for Indigenous rights and title. And I also believe that we need to be moving forward with not just their elected system, but also with their hereditary system as well. So a lot of those that you have alluded to dealt with some Indigenous, it's the complexity of the Indigenous governance system within their own. And we need to respect that. And we need to come to a place where we are all working together on that. And that's why I believe in the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. And I also believe in DRIPA that we brought in. We were the first province in Canada to actually enact a law that helped us move that UNDRIP forward. And I'm extremely proud of that. And I'm extremely proud of the results that we're getting through it. And yes, peaceful protest has always been a part of the democratic process, and I would hope it stayed.
Thank you. Response? If you have a question, please bring it to the floor and do it with respect. We need you on the microphone because other people will be watching this streaming and they wouldn't hear your question otherwise.
I apologize to everybody. It was an impulsive question.
Can I ask you to hold for just a second, sir? I got thrown off. Nick, you didn't get an opportunity to answer the last question, so please hold off. Thank you.
I believe in having a voice. I believe in peaceful protests. I have personal experience with the law coming in to affect our peaceful protests. I think that people have the choice of being able to voice their opinion. sorry about this, but you've touched on a subject that's a bit tricky here. I understand the complexity of the different levels of Indigenous government between hereditary and elected. I understand, but we need to be able to have those protests. We need to be able to have a voice, and we need to have law be respectful of those individuals that are standing up and taking a voice so that we can create awareness on the issues. Often the issues aren't solved at the protests themselves. It then goes on to community levels, and that's where it needs to work through respectfully.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you, Nick Dedalek. My apologies for missing you out there.
It's okay.
And sir, thank you for your patience. Question from microphone 1.
Again, my apologies for blurting out. Yeah, everybody likes the right to protest, freedom of speech, as long as the speech and the protests is something they're in favor of. Now, I've already heard a couple of slurs to the right wing from this very panel, including the Freedom Convoy, which was a peaceful protest generally.
Do you have a question, sir?
Well, then, this is all about my question. Would you both support the right of somebody protesting things that you totally disagree with?
First response goes to Nick Dedalek.
I think that everyone has a right to voice their opinion. And while I may not agree with all protests, if they are done peacefully, everyone should be able to have a right to their voice.
Thank you, Michelle Babchuk.
I agree with that as well. That's our democratic system, and that's what makes us in Canada, I believe, strong. The ability for competing opinions to be able to be articulated. But they need to be articulated in a peaceful way, in a respectful way. And I have to be truthful. I'm watching now in our society a whole pile of aggression, and we are very polarized. And the art of a respectful conversation where you can agree to disagree seems to have gone out the window. You are either for or against. And I would love to see us get back to the ability to all be able to sit in a room, be able to have a conversation, to make good decisions from all opinions from around the table, and not be so polarized.
Thank you. Question from microphone 2, and then we will take one more question after that, and then we have to move on to closing statements.
Thank you both for being here and for sharing your experiences, and you're looking forward to the future. And I realize that what we're focusing on right now is an election, but I would like to ask a question about governance, because that is what is pressing on my heart. And I know the Green Party is a very collaborative party and supports proportional representation, and I know that the NDP have put that question forward a couple of times, and as a province we have not stepped into that, and so I'd like to bring that question back for each of you. How important is it that you would pursue proportional representation in the government? Thank you.
Thank you. First response to Michelle Babchuk.
So I think as a party, we understand the importance of proportional representation, and that's why we put it out to referendum. When was that? 27? When was that, Dan? Quick. I can't remember. But it did go out to referendum, and the people in BC said no. But anytime we can take a look at how our democratic system works and actually make it so people access it more and become more engaged, I'm a fan. And if that's proportional representation, then I would certainly love to take a look at it again. But I think it needs to have the will of the people in the province to be able to push it through.
Thank you. A response from Nick Dedelek.
I totally support proportional representation, and I hope it remains a conversation that we can still have and keep that moving forward so that we can work towards having proportional representation.
Thank you. Last question from microphone 2.
Don't worry, it's not a follow-up. For both of you guys, what are you guys doing to engage younger voters?
First response goes to Nick Dedelek.
If I understand correctly, so I don't feel actually like there's a ton of things that I can do as a running candidate. But one thing that I have been really advocating for and helping with is trying to get those that aren't registered to vote and don't understand how to register to vote. It's actually quite easy if you know what you're supposed to be doing. So trying to reach out and help those individuals get registered. I have a very small team, so while I would like to say that I'm going to all the communities and helping to provide rides, to be able to get people to the voting station. That's one thing that we're still working on being able to provide. So I think it's really important that everybody is able to vote.
Thank you. And Michelle Babchuk.
Yeah, I think this is a really great question because they're a huge part of our society right now, demographic. And we know that a lot of our young people don't vote. And you got to ask yourself why. And I think what we're finding is that we're not engaging them on the platforms in which they reside. So we're trying very hard to take a look at our social media platforms and see if we can't reach out to them that way. And we are actually having some really good engagement on that in the colleges for sure. We will be, I think, Nick, I'm not sure if you're going to carry high to their debate, so they're not voters yet, but they're going to be very, very soon. And, you know, I just have to listen to my kids and my grandkids to know what the issues are for them moving forward. And they are worried about the environment. They are worried about owning a home. They are worried about affordability. And if we don't listen to our youth and we don't listen to our young voters, then we're not going to go very far.
I thank you. And I thank all who submitted questions and all who brought questions from the floor. It has been a fascinating discussion. We have now moved through all those phases. We are on to closing statements from our candidates, and we'll start with 2 minutes for Nick Dedelek.
Okay. Thank you all for coming out this afternoon on a Sunday afternoon and participating in this. I had really hoped that it would be a 3-candidate debate. I'm saddened by that, and I feel that's not entirely respectful to all of you that participated expecting 3. I really just wanted to, I hope that today I've been able to answer questions for you. I hope that I've been able to give you an open mind to thinking about voting Green. The Green Party truly does provide an opportunity for us to work with the other parties to move things forward for our communities in a positive and safe manner. I have learned so much through this process. I have loved learning and listening to your concerns. I would love the opportunity to represent you in the legislature, but most importantly, I hope you get out and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And 2 minutes closing statement from Michelle Babchuk.
Sure, and I'd like to start by thanking the Chamber of Commerce and the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board for putting on this all candidates today and for all the great questions that were mailed in and from the floor. Forums like this are super important because people are wanting to hear the differences between parties and they want to hear them side by side so that they can make those decisions. And I'm also really disappointed that Anna Kendi didn't show up here today. And like I said earlier, she'll show up for a Freedom Rally convoy, she'll show up for an anti-vax rally, she'll show up to protest on the steps of the College of Physicians and Surgeons over vaccine mandates, but she's not going to show up here for you. In this riding, we need people that will show up. So it's important to have a leader, I believe, like David Eby, that's laser focused on making lives better and believes in BC's potential. Not one that fixates on conspiracy theories, negative rhetoric, and assigning blame. I really want to thank Nick for showing up today and for all of her thoughtful comments. I know we agree on so much, but we also have differences. But this election is between two parties, and the Green Party can't beat John Rustad in this riding. So that's why I'm asking your support on October the 19th. You know, everything is not perfect. We know that we still have challenges, but we are starting to see progress. We are starting to turn a corner. And John Rustad is reckless, and he's a risk we can't afford. I want to thank everybody for being here today, and thank you for all of your important questions. And like I said, I am asking for your support on October the 19th.
The Green Party's Nick Daedaluk and the NDP's Michelle Babchuk, thank you both for putting your names forward and spending the last 2 hours under the glare of the lights and intense scrutiny. It has been a pleasure. General voting day is Saturday, October 19th. Polls are open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Advanced voting opportunities differ from community to community, but in Campbell River, advanced polls are open 8 to 8 on Thursday, October 10th, all the way to Tuesday, October 14th, with the exception of Thanksgiving Monday when they are closed. You can check your voter card or visit elections.bc.ca for information about advanced voting opportunities in other North Island communities. I'd like to thank our timekeeper, Taryn Sieben, for keeping us on track. The Vancouver Island Real Estate Board for supporting this All Candidates Forum. Thanks as well to the City of Campbell River, the Campbell River and District Chamber of Commerce, and the Tidemark Theatre. And a big thank you to you, the audience, for taking the time to support the democratic process and for caring about the future of your community, your region, and your province. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today. Thank you for showing up. It's democracy, it matters. Thank you to Michelle, thank you to Nick, thank you to Dan, our moderator, Taryn, our timekeeper, to the Tidemark Theatre, the City of Campbell River, and of course our sponsor, the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board. Thank you. Please vote. It matters.